There's something about being alone on a highway at night that makes you feel like the only person left in the world. It's this weird, quiet kind of isolation. You're just a pair of headlights carving through miles of nothing. Like you're not driving through the world, you're outside it. That's the kind of night I was having. I was heading back from my mom's place. She lives way out in the country, near those towns that have a single gas station, a dollar store, and nothing else. The sky had opened up right after dinner. Big storm, where the rain's coming in sideways and the lightning looks close enough to touch. I had about an hour drive back to my apartment, mostly two-lane highways that wind through farmland and pine forest. No streetlights, no shoulder, barely any signal. I remember checking the clock. It was a little after 10. I was tired, windshield wipers on full speed, music turned low, just trying to focus on the road through all that rain. That's when I saw it. At first, it just looked like a flicker off to the side. But then the lightning flashed and I saw it clear. A car, nose down in the flooded ditch off the right side of the road. Still had its headlights on, one of them half submerged underwater. The whole thing was tilted at an angle like it had veered off and slid into the ditch sideways. Not flipped or anything, just stuck. I slowed down and pulled off onto the gravel. Rolled my window down a crack and shouted, trying to see if anyone was still inside. Couldn't hear much over the rain. I grabbed my flashlight and got out. The rain soaked me immediately. My boots sank a little in the mud, and the wind was howling through the trees like something alive. I remember thinking this is the part in the movie where something bad happens, but it felt wrong to just leave without checking. When I got to the car, the engine was still ticking, still warm. The driver's side door was cracked open, not all the way, just enough that it hadn't fully latched. Inside, the seats were empty. No bags, no wallet. Just an old air freshener dangling from the rearview mirror and a set of keys still in the ignition. I looked around, no footprints, not at first. Just rain and roadside brush. I called out again. No answer. That's when I started getting uneasy. Not scared exactly, just off. Like something wasn't lining up. Why would someone leave their car running in the middle of a thunderstorm and walk off into the woods? I went back to my truck and called 911. Told them what I'd found. The dispatcher asked for cross streets. Took a minute to figure those out, but she said deputies were on their way. So I waited. 15, maybe 20 minutes later, 2 cruisers pulled up. One deputy stayed in the car. The other got out with a flashlight and met me by the ditch. I walked him over, told him everything I saw. How the door was open, engine still warm, but nobody inside. I mentioned I didn't touch anything. He checked it out himself, then radioed the other deputy. They both started canvassing the area, shining lights into the trees, calling out. That's when one of them stopped suddenly and waved me over. I stayed at the edge of the road while he crouched down, shining his flashlight at the mud just past the ditch. Footprints, clear ones, barefoot. You could see the toes in the mud. Small, like a woman or maybe a teenager. They led from the driver's side of the car up into the woods. But the strangest part? They only went one way. No returning tracks. Nothing to say the person had come back out. The deputy muttered something to the other, then turned back to me and said I could go. They were going to bring in search and rescue. I didn't argue. I got back in my car, cranked the heat, and drove home soaked and wired, running every possibility through my head. Maybe she'd wandered off looking for help. Maybe she hit her head and got turned around. Maybe someone had picked her up before I got there. But none of it felt right. 2 days later, I saw it on the news. 2 bodies, found nailed to a tree deep in that same patch of forest. A man and a woman. The details were vague. Sheriff's office said foul play was suspected. Investigation ongoing. They didn't name the victims, didn't say how they got there, but I kept refreshing every article I could find, waiting for something. Eventually, a local station said they were still trying to piece it together, but the car found on the highway was connected. Deputies had followed the prints into the woods, but heavy rain that night had washed most of the trail away. That was all they said. No arrests, no motive.
No explanation.
Just 2 people who vanished into the trees. Sometimes I wonder if that's what the storm was hiding. Not an accident, but a trap. Like that car wasn't a cry for help. It was bait, a lure, left there for someone to find and care enough to stop. And I keep thinking, what if I'd gotten there sooner? What if I'd walked a little deeper into the woods? What if, instead of calling the cops, I'd followed the footprints? You ever have that moment when something small happens, but it makes your stomach flip like your body knows something before your brain catches up? That happened to me a few months ago, during a thunderstorm, third floor of a brick apartment building I'd lived in for almost 5 years. It wasn't the kind of place you'd think anything scary could happen. Mostly retirees and grad students, quiet neighborhood, not the kind of place that ends up on the news, you know? I live alone. Always have, and mostly I like it. I'm a graphic designer, which means a lot of time at home, coffee always in arm's reach, music low in the background, everything just the way I like it. My apartment is a little old. Radiators hiss in the winter, the windows rattle when the wind's bad, but it's cozy, lived in. That night, I remember it was raining hard, the kind of storm where you can't hear your own thoughts over the thunder. I had a candle burning on the coffee table, my laptop open, the whole place glowing orange and soft. I was editing a client logo, half watching some old paranormal documentary in the background. Just a normal, quiet night, until I heard this snap. It was sharp, like something metal hitting wood. Not the thunder, not the wind. Something from inside. I paused the video and listened, heart starting to race a little. Then I heard it again, this time clearer, coming from the guest room. Now, for context, the guest room barely gets used. It's just a small room down the hall where I keep an old futon, some storage boxes, and my bike during the winter. The window in there faces the alley between my building and the one next door. I got up, walked down the hall, turned on the light, and sure enough, the window was wide open. Rain blowing in, the sill wet, curtain flapping around like it was trying to escape. I remember thinking I must have left it unlatched, even though I couldn't remember the last time I'd opened it at all. Still, it was an old building. Latches came loose sometimes. I closed it, latched it tight, wiped down the sill with an old towel from the laundry bin, and went back to the couch. Figured that was the end of it. But not even 15 minutes later, I heard it again. Same snap, same fluttering sound. I sat there for a second, frozen, thinking no way. I walked back, and yep, wide open again. And it wasn't the latch this time. That thing had been sealed tight. I felt it lock into place. But now it was completely swung open, like someone had forced it. I looked around the room, even checked the closet, trying to calm myself down. I told myself maybe it hadn't latched all the way, maybe the storm pushed it open. I shut it again, pulled down the window lock hard, tied the curtains back so I'd hear if they moved again. This time I stayed in the room for a while, just standing there, arms crossed, waiting to see if anything happened. I even opened the door to the hallway in case it was creating some kind of pressure thing. Nothing. So after a few minutes, I went back to the couch, lit a second candle, told myself I was being dramatic, and then maybe 20 minutes later, there it was again. But this time, I didn't hear the snap. I just felt watched, like someone had walked into the room behind me. I stood up so fast the candle almost fell off the table, and I didn't even bother creeping down the hall this time. I walked straight back into the guest room, flipped on the light, and my whole body just locked up. The window was open again, but this time, there were muddy footprints on the sill. 2 of them, the kind you'd get if someone had climbed in, 1 foot planted, then the other turned inward like they were squatting or crouched. And the worst part, there was no fire escape, no balcony, just 3 stories of brick wall below. I stood there, staring at those prints, my heart thudding so loud I swear I couldn't hear the storm anymore. Just that, just the weight of someone being there. Someone who had climbed, somehow, up the outside of my building, just to see if the window was locked, just to see if I was home. I backed out of the room and locked the door. Not that it would do much. Then I called the police with shaking hands. They came pretty quickly, all things considered. 2 officers swept the whole apartment, looked out the window, even walked the alley with flashlights. But by then, the prints were just wet smudges. Rain had started to wash them away. No one was in the building. No signs of forced entry. They said maybe it was some homeless person, maybe a prank, maybe I was just freaked out by the storm. But they didn't say it with any confidence. They didn't say it like they believed it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with every light on, holding a kitchen knife like that was going to help. I kept imagining someone just outside the window, fingers hooked on the sill, waiting for the lights to go out again. The next day, I had a locksmith come replace all the locks and screw the guest room window shut, permanently. I even installed a security camera on the fire escape outside my kitchen, even though it doesn't point toward the alley. I never saw the person. I never heard anything again. But I know they were there, and I still can't shake the thought. They weren't trying to break in. Not that night. They were testing, seeing if I locked my windows, seeing if I was home, and I wasn't supposed to be. That's the part that still gets me. They weren't expecting anyone to be there that night, which means they'd been watching. If you're drawn to tales like these, consider subscribing to Spectral for more chilling entries waiting to be uncovered. And if you have your own haunting story that you'd like featured in an upcoming compilation, we'd love to hear it. Just email us at spectralentries@gmail.com. Now, let's get back to the video. You ever look back on something that almost happened and just feel sick thinking about how close you were? Like you didn't even dodge a bullet, you almost walked right into one, smiling. This happened to me and my boyfriend, Ethan, during Hurricane Cameron. If you were anywhere near the Gulf that year, you know the one I mean. It hit harder than anyone expected, and everyone was scrambling to get out. We lived in Louisiana at the time, New Iberia, which isn't exactly beachfront, but close enough that when they said evacuate, we listened. We packed up the car with bottled water, food, flashlights, our dog Jasper, and started heading north. Only problem? Everyone else had the same idea. By the time we hit Alexandria, every motel and hotel was either fully booked or charging ridiculous prices. I'm talking $400 for a night in a room with no power, no running water, and probably bed bugs. I was checking every travel app one could find, calling places from Yelp, even searching Facebook groups. Nothing. That's when Ethan found the Craigslist post. He was scrolling through his phone in the passenger seat, frustrated, and goes, "Hey, this guy's offering a storm shelter. Free. Says he's got a reinforced basement, lives just outside town, and has hosted evacuees before. Left a phone number and everything." Now I know. Craigslist during a hurricane sounds dumb, but in the moment, when you're tired, scared, and watching your gas tank drop in the middle of a storm, you make different decisions. Ethan called. The guy sounded normal, friendly even. Said his name was Randall. Lived out on a property a little off the highway. Said we'd be safe there and could bring our dog. Said he'd already helped a few families earlier in the week, but they'd moved on now. The directions were a little weird. He asked us not to use GPS, just follow a route he texted. Said his road didn't show up properly on maps. But again, it was a stressful situation. Nothing felt that strange yet. When we pulled up, I remember thinking it looked almost too normal. Little white house, porch swing, big oak tree in the front. He came out to greet us wearing jeans, a flannel, and work boots. Looked like someone's grandpa, totally unthreatening. He was nice, even gave Jasper a treat. Said we could park on the gravel patch around back and he'd show us to the basement. Said the house itself didn't have much protection, but the shelter underneath was hurricane-proof, and we'd be more comfortable down there anyway. He led us around the side of the house to a heavy-looking storm door set into the ground, like a tornado cellar, opened it and waved us down. And that's when my stomach flipped, because on the outside of the basement door, not the inside, there were 3 deadbolts. Thick, old-school metal ones. Not the kind you install to keep someone out. The kind you use to lock someone in. I hesitated. Ethan must have noticed too. because he put his hand on my arm and kind of gave me this look, like, what do you think? I didn't even say anything. I just shook my head. The guy noticed, asked if something was wrong. I said I had a bit of claustrophobia, which was sort of true, and maybe we'd just sleep in the car for the night. Thanks anyway. And I watched his face shift just slightly, like he went from overly friendly to just blank. Not angry, not rude, just empty. He shrugged, said suit yourself, and walked back up the porch steps without another word. We drove out of there fast. Ended up sleeping in the car behind a gas station 2 towns over. Uncomfortable as hell, but we made it. Power came back the next day, and a week later we were back home, cleaning out the fridge and trying to act normal again. But that basement door kept popping up in my head, and the more I thought about it, the more it didn't sit right. So I looked up the address. First, nothing came up, but then I found a survivalist forum, one of those weird old-school message boards, and someone had posted something under a thread about safe hurricane shelter options. A user had replied, avoid address. Guy offered me and my sister shelter during Hurricane Delta. Basement door locks from the outside. We got a weird vibe and left. Later found a camera pointed at the bed. Sketchy as hell. Another user replied, weird. Same guy tried to get me to stay during Laura. Said I could use the basement for privacy. I left after seeing a bolt on the outside of the hatch. Felt like a trap. There were 4 more stories just like that. Same guy, same address, same routine. And every time they got far enough to notice something was wrong, just like we did, but none of them had enough proof to report anything. No crimes, technically, just a bad feeling, a bad place. I told Ethan and he got so quiet. We just sat there for a while, staring at the laptop. Didn't even talk about what could have happened. We didn't want to. We still think about it. That basement, those bolts, the guy who didn't try to stop us from leaving, because that's the part that freaks me out the most. He didn't panic. He didn't chase us. He just waited, like he knew someone else would come along. Eventually,